The sound of paper being crumpled tore through the air like an invisible whip, lashing across the cabin's luxury. A boarding pass, the very symbol of order and rightful privilege, was ripped apart before everyone's eyes. That harsh tearing silenced the first-class cabin of Skylux Flight 719, as if even the engines themselves had been strangled into stillness. "I'm sorry, sir. This seat is not yours." The voice of Chief Attendant Marissa Kane fell cold, trembling yet rigid. It was not just a refusal. It was a blade that sliced dignity away beneath the gaze of onlookers. First class, often described as a golden chapel in the sky, still shimmered with light glinting off cream leather seats and crystal glasses. Yet in the midst of perfection, a tragedy was unfolding. In Seat 1A, Adrian Cross, 40th & 6, CEO of Nova Dynamics, sat in silence. He did not need to boast, did not need to argue. His authority radiated from his upright posture, the deep blue tie neatly centered, the eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. Silent, but impossible to dismiss. Adrian calmly handed the intact ticket toward Marissa, his voice quiet yet steady. "Adrian Cross, Seat 1A." In that moment, Marissa's chest tightened. She had handled countless conflicts, soothed angry passengers with nothing more than a smile. But today was different. Today, beside Seat 1A, stood a storm named Victor Langford, 56, a veteran investor who believed himself the ruler of these skies. Victor stepped forward, the scent of wine still clinging to his breath, his wrist weighed down by a glinting gold watch. He loomed as though even the cabin lights bent to his presence. "I have sat here for years. This seat belongs to me." The air stretched taut like a violin string. In Seat 2D, Helena Ward, 52, chairwoman of a vast investment fund, tilted her head to observe. Outwardly, she was a velvet rose, but those who had negotiated with her knew she was a blade wrapped in silk. When her gaze settled on the ticket in Marissa's hand, her eyes flashed, the spark of someone who had just witnessed a fatal mistake. In Seat 3A, a young businessman frowned, uneasy, injustice leaking into the plush cushions and heavy air. Adrian did not flare in anger, did not shout. He replied evenly, "There is no rule reserving seats for habit, Mr. Langford. The ticket says it all." Marissa glanced at Victor, then back at the ticket. Voices clamored in her mind. "Do not cause trouble. Do not provoke Victor." One phone call from him and her career would be over. And then, rip! Her hands clenched, shredding the ticket into scraps. The sound cracked like a verdict. A man in Seat 1C cleared his throat. The young executive in 3A lifted his head. Helena set her glass of wine down, her eyes darkening. And Victor smirked, satisfied as a king reclaiming his throne. "You see, Seat 1A is mine." Adrian stared at the shredded paper in Marissa's hands. His eyes saw more than a ticket. They saw years endured, the sneers in boardrooms, the cold handshakes thick with prejudice, the contracts he signed to save thousands of jobs, yet still being treated as an outsider. He drew a long breath, then nodded. "I'll take 4C." He rose, slowly, steadily. Each step across the thick carpet struck like a gavel against the hearts of those watching. Marissa felt her shoulders lighten, having dodged a storm, but her chest sank heavy. She knew she had traded justice for the illusion of peace. Adrian sat in 4C, setting aside his tablet. His pulse did not quicken. Rage did not consume him. Instead, something deeper stirred. The memory of past humiliations, the sting of prejudice, and above all, resolve. Victor reclined, signaling for champagne. He laughed loudly, making sure the 3 nearby rows could hear. Everything is back where it belongs. Yet in seat 2D, Helena kept her eyes on Adrian. She alone saw what others missed. His calm was not resignation. It was the composure of a man, waiting for the precise moment to turn the tide. Adrian unlocked his phone. His finger hovered over a secure app where only one contact was marked. The cursor blinked, waiting. He typed one word. Now. He pressed send. The screen went dark. Around the cabin, spoons clinked porcelain. The coffee machine hissed. Footsteps tapped rhythmically. Life continued, but some passengers sensed the shift, like the drop in pressure before a storm. Victor raised his glass, basking in smug triumph. Marissa straightened the tablecloth, convinced she had avoided disaster. Unaware, the wave she feared had already begun, triggered the moment she tore that ticket apart. In seat 4C, Adrian sat tall, his eyes dark as midnight seas. Not angry, not shouting. But within that silence, a storm had formed, and soon the skies of first class would relearn the true meaning of order. The fizz of champagne in Victor Langford's crystal glass sounded like mocking laughter thrown in everyone's face. He lounged back in seat 1A, legs crossed, eyes half closed, lips curled with arrogance. For Victor, first class was not merely luxury service, it was the throne he believed he owned. Order has been restored, he declared, his voice deliberately loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Some people are born to sit at the front, and others are not. A few passengers immediately lowered their heads into their newspapers, pretending not to hear. Others turned to the windows, avoiding the scene. But certain gazes lingered, burning with restrained outrage. In seat 3A, Ethan Hale, a young businessman, leaned toward his companion and whispered, "He had a valid ticket. I saw it. How can this be happening?" His friend tugged nervously at his sleeve, hissing, "Don't get involved. It's not worth it." Yet the glow of a phone lit up across the aisle. A woman's face reflected on her screen as she secretly filmed the scene. The outside world did not know yet, but within hours this moment would erupt into a storm across social media. Marissa walked past row 4C, a strained smile frozen on her face. Inside, her thoughts were chaos. Was I right or wrong? The question pounded in her head like a hammer. She thought of the loan awaiting approval, her young daughter at home, the power of the Langfords, who could destroy her career with a single call. Fear smothered conscience, and she knew she had just become an accomplice to blatant injustice. Helena Ward sat upright, her hands loosely folded on her lap. Her face was composed like a still mirror, but her eyes were sharp, capturing every detail. She knew Adrian Cross well. They had once been allies, dreaming of reshaping global finance around fairness. Later their paths diverged, Their philosophies clashed. But now, watching Adrian publicly humiliated, an old string inside her heart trembled again. In seat 4C, Adrian sat silent, eyes fixed forward. No one could hear his slow heartbeat, but in that silence, memories surged. He remembered a boardroom in Chicago, a director smiling as he said, "Perhaps you're not the right cultural fit." He remembered contracts denied because he did not have the right image to lead. Each word, each dismissive glance, compressed in his chest. And now, all of it condensed into the image of a torn ticket. Adrian unlocked his phone, the blue glow catching in his deep eyes. A single word already displayed. Now. His finger tapped send. In seat 2D, Helena's phone vibrated. One message, one word. Her expression did not change, but the corner of her lips twitched. He had activated it. No explanations needed. Just a signal. And a dormant system began to stir. In the cabin, Victor's laughter still rang. He lifted his glass, pouring more champagne. The world runs on order. Those who know their place will never be humiliated. Adrian did not turn back, but his silence traveled further than any rebuttal. It unsettled the nearby passengers, made Helena clutch her armrest, made sweat bead on Marissa's forehead. A junior attendant walked by, deliberately topping off Victor's glass, but when she passed Adrian, her eyes slid away. In her mind, a whisper rose. He is not angry. He is waiting. But waiting for what? The answer came slowly, like the roll of distant drums. The seatbelt sign flickered. A chime sounded. The intercom crackled with a calm voice. "Attention passengers, due to operational requirements, the entire flight crew will now be replaced immediately. Please remain seated." The cabin erupted in shock. "Replacing the entire crew?" a woman gasped. "This has never happened before," a middle-aged man exclaimed. Marissa nearly collapsed, knees buckling. Her heart pounded. She knew this did not come from the airline. It came from higher up, from the very power she had just trampled. Victor slammed his glass down, growling, "What the hell is happening? This is my plane, my cabin, my seat. Who dares?" Adrian calmly folded his hands. His eyes half closed, his breathing steady. Not a word. But his silence drew every gaze. Helena tilted her head, her eyes flashing. The match had begun, and Victor had just played a fatal move. In mere minutes, first class was no longer a sanctuary of luxury. It had become an invisible battlefield, where true power and false power collided. Victor Langford did not realize it yet. He thought he had won. But in Adrian's silence, in that single word message, a storm had already been unleashed, and first class would never be the same again. The intercom went silent, and the first class cabin of Sky Lux 7 and 18 sank into a heavy stillness. No more refined murmurs, no more crystal glasses clinking softly. Only a dense silence, like a storm waiting to break. Victor Langford roared, his voice slamming against the polished wooden panels like a hammer blow. "Absurd! I am a founding shareholder. No one has the right to do this while I am here." He shot to his feet, chest thrust forward, face flushed red. The champagne glass on the table trembled, spilling drops onto the pristine white linen. In Victor's mind, first class was still his domain, and anyone who dared disrupt that order must be crushed. Marissa Kane trembled, forcing a hollow smile, but her sweat-soaked hands betrayed her. I was wrong from the moment I tore that ticket. Wrong beyond repair. In seat 2D, Helena Ward lifted her wine glass but did not drink. She observed every detail, every tremor. The man in seat 4C, Adrian Cross, had not moved. His chest rose slowly, his breath steady, his eyes half closed. Yet that very calm sent a chill down Helena's spine. She had faced powerful men, shaken hands with arrogant billionaires, but none had ever made her feel as though she stood before a dormant earthquake beneath a volcano. Beside her, a young woman whispered to her husband, "He's not reacting, but I feel like he ordered this." The husband shook his head, muttering, "Impossible. Just a coincidence." But doubt had already taken root in their eyes. Victor stormed toward row 4C, where Adrian sat. He jabbed a finger, his voice hissing through clenched teeth. "You! Who do you think you are? Your ticket was cancelled. You are just an ordinary first-class passenger. Don't think silence will make you win." The cabin held its breath. All eyes turned to Adrian. He opened his eyes. The deep black pupils reflected the warm cabin lights, and Victor faltered for half a beat. Adrian set his tablet aside and rose to his feet. Every movement was slow, deliberate, as if he had all the sky to take his time. His voice resonated, not loud, but steady, each word striking the air like nails driven in. "I have a valid ticket. I sat exactly where it was assigned. And you, do you believe your investments give you the right to trample principles?" Victor burst into laughter, but it was dry, harsh, hollow. Principles? Principles serve money. I poured hundreds of millions into this airline. Without me, Seat 1A would not exist. It is mine, and it will always be mine. Adrian stepped closer, until only inches separated them. He was not taller, nor louder, but his calm gaze seemed to drain the oxygen from the cabin. "You are mistaken. Money can buy many things, but it can never buy respect. And today, you have lost both." His words fell like a verdict. A murmur rippled through the back rows. A businesswoman nodded, whispering, "He's right." A young man gripped his phone tighter, secretly recording, his eyes shining with agreement. Victor's face burned red, and he thrust his hand toward Marissa. "You! Call the board immediately. I'll have him thrown off this plane." Marissa froze, her throat dry. Before she could speak, another voice rang out from the rear, deep, firm, undeniable. "Mr. Langford." All eyes turned toward the door. Nathan Cole, Skylux's senior supervisor, entered in a sharp grey suit. His steps thudded with precision on the thick carpet, like drums signaling a shift. His face was cold as ice, his voice sharp as steel. "Effective immediately. All of your privileges within Skylux are revoked. You no longer have authority over this flight, nor the right to represent your shares." The cabin erupted in shocked whispers. Some passengers gaped, others raised their phones, capturing what they sensed was history unfolding. Victor staggered, his face drained of color. He stammered, No, this can't be. I'll sue. I'll bring this entire airline down." Adrian remained upright, neither smiling nor mocking. He simply tilted his head, his calm gaze more terrifying than fury. In that moment, every passenger understood. Seat 1A had never truly belonged to Victor, and Adrian's silence was not weakness, it was the sharpest strike of all. Marissa's hands dropped, her eyes blurred with tears. She knew the game had shifted. Helena lifted her glass, the corners of her lips curling faintly. The board had turned. But this was only the beginning. Adrian returned to his seat. He did not shout, did not flaunt wealth, did not threaten. With one word, now, he had shaken an entire system. And first class, once drenched in pretense, was now learning a new lesson. True power does not need noise. Victor Langford's ragged breathing echoed through the cabin, blending with the steady hum of the engines outside the wing. The man who once considered the skies his private domain was trembling, though he tried to mask it with a contemptuous laugh. He tapped his fingers against the small table beside seat 1A. The sharp clicks like a declaration. I am still here. I am still the master. Listen. Victor raised his head, his voice rough and sharp. No one has the right to take this seat from me. I've been pouring capital into Skylux since day one. If I call the board, you, the man in seat 4C, will be thrown off immediately. The cabin fell silent again. Every eye turned toward Adrian Cross. He did not rise, did not answer right away. Instead, he lifted his glass of water, letting his finger touch the thin rim. The soft ringing sound rippled through the air like a spreading wave. In seat 2D, Helena Ward arched an eyebrow. She had seen that look in Adrian's eyes years ago, the kind of gaze that neither shouted nor raged, yet could make an entire room full of CEOs bow their heads to listen. He was about to strike. Adrian set the glass down and stood. Each step toward Victor landed like a drumbeat against the chests of those watching. Mr. Langford, his voice was low and steady. I hold a valid ticket. I sat in the seat assigned to me. You think money buys everything, even the truth. But you forget one thing. Money has never been able to buy respect. Victor burst out laughing, the sound brittle, like glass shattering. You sound like a philosopher, Cross. But remember this. This plane flies because of my money. Seat 1A is the symbol of the power I built. Adrian stepped closer, his deep eyes locking on Victor. His voice did not rise, but each word drove into the cabin walls like nails. You're right. It is a symbol. But today, that symbol no longer belongs to you. Whispers erupted across the cabin. A woman in 3A gasped softly. He's challenging Victor directly. Marissa Kane clenched her fists, her heart pounding wildly. How dare he? How could he be so calm? Yet deep in her mind, a whisper lingered. He's not just any passenger. Who is he? Victor's face burned red, his finger trembling as he jabbed it toward Adrian's chest. Do you even know who I am? With one call, I can have you thrown off this plane. I can burn your entire career to ashes. Adrian did not flinch. He dipped his head slightly, his voice quiet. but with a weight that made everyone shiver. "Go ahead. Call. But remember, when you do, they will call me back." The cabin froze. Ethan Hale, the young businessman in 3A, gaped in disbelief. Helena closed her eyes briefly, lips pressing together as a faint smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. There it was, the decisive blow. Victor faltered, his throat tight, searching for allies. But instead of the familiar looks of deference, he found only suspicion staring back at him. A few passengers even raised their phones, recording every second. Nathan Cole, the senior supervisor, stepped deeper into the cabin. He did not need to speak. His presence alone was a verdict. Marissa nearly collapsed into her seat, her breath shallow and rapid. In her mind, a painful truth struck like lightning. She had torn the ticket of a man the entire system was compelled to hear. Victor stammered, his voice breaking. You're threatening me?" Adrian tilted his head, his eyes gleaming like steel, a faint smile brushing his lips. "No, I'm simply reminding you, you're not the only one with the board's phone number." The cabin erupted in murmurs. A businesswoman in 2C nodded firmly. "Yes, that's the truth." The young man in 3A whispered, He's definitely not an ordinary passenger." Victor staggered, his champagne glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the carpet, shards of crystal scattering like fragments of pride. He looked around desperately, but not a single gaze sided with him anymore. Helena raised her glass, took a small sip, and set it down. She thought quietly to herself. Victor lost the moment Adrian didn't even have to raise his voice. Adrian returned to his seat. He needed no more words. Reclining into 4C, he quietly opened his tablet, his finger gliding across rows of cold numbers on the screen. But everyone knew. This was not the man forced from seat 1A. This was the man who had just reclaimed order itself, with deadly calm. And from that moment on, Skylux 718 was no longer just a luxurious flight. It had become a stage for a battle of power, where silence thundered louder than any storm. Victor Langford collapsed into seat 1A, his trembling hand gripping the armrest with desperate force. His flushed face looked like a volcano on the verge of eruption. The shattered champagne glass at his feet stained the pristine carpet, the spill spreading like a blemish that could not be erased. "Enough!" Victor roared, his voice hoarse. "You all better remember, I am not just a passenger. I am Skylux. Without me, this airline wouldn't survive a single day." He slammed his fist down on the table. The sharp crack startled a few passengers, but fear no longer filled their eyes. Instead, they stared back with coldness, suspicion, even contempt. In seat 2D, Helena Ward tilted her head, her gaze sharp as a blade. She saw it clearly. Victor was destroying himself. Every word he spat, instead of proving his power, only exposed his desperation. Adrian Cross still sat calmly in 4C, flipping through pages on his tablet. His fingers moved steadily, as though nothing outside was worth his attention. But that indifference was what drove Victor mad. "How dare you still sit there, Cross?" Victor jabbed a shaking finger at him, his voice breaking with fury. "Do you think one sentence is enough to bring me down? I will call the board right now. In 1 minute, you will be gone from this plane." He snatched his phone, punching in a number frantically. The air in first class froze. Marissa Kane clutched her notebook, her palms drenched in sweat. If he actually connected, what would happen? The call rang. Victor put it on speaker, forcing a tone of authority back into his voice. "This is Victor Langford. I demand the board intervene immediately. An imposter is seizing control of my flight." A long silence followed. Then a deep male voice broke through, calm yet cutting. "We are aware, Mr. Langford. And to be clear, you no longer have authority to intervene. Effective immediately, all of your shareholder privileges are frozen." The entire cabin went still. Victor's face drained, his stomach dropping like a stone. "What you can't, I am." The voice cut him off without hesitation. "Mr. Langford, this is the unanimous decision of the board. You no longer represent Skylux." The line disconnected. The flat tone beeped loudly through the cabin, slicing through his pride like a blade. A wave of murmurs surged. A businesswoman whispered, "My God, he really lost everything." A young man nodded. "That seat never belonged to him. Now it's plain to see." Victor froze for a few seconds, his lips trembling, then screamed like a wounded beast. "No, you are betraying me. This airline exists because of me, do you hear? Because of me." He whipped around to Marissa, his voice drenched in despair. "You, say something. Tell them I deserve to be here." Marissa recoiled, her face pale as ash. In her chest, a heavy stone dropped. She had chosen the wrong man. So wrong, it could never be undone. Ethan Hale, the young businessman in 3A, suddenly spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "We all saw. The man with the valid ticket is Mr. Cross. And you are just someone abusing power." Several passengers nodded quietly. The truth could no longer be silenced. Victor's frantic eyes darted around, searching for an ally. But the faces that once shrank in fear now stared back coldly. Some even raised their phones, recording his every word and movement. Helena's lips curled into the faintest smile, her eyes flashing with ruthless clarity. He was finished. Completely finished. At that moment, Adrian set his tablet aside and stood. He walked slowly toward Victor, his eyes calm yet piercing. "Mr. Langford," Adrian said, his voice firm and resonant, each word striking like a hammer. "You can lose money. You can lose a seat. But the worst loss is respect. And once that is gone, nothing can save you." Victor trembled, his lips quivering soundlessly. His body seemed like a dying bulb, flickering weakly, struggling against the inevitable dark. A chime sounded from the intercom. The steady voice of a female pilot filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, the new crew will be entering the cabin shortly. Please remain seated." The first-class door swung open. Strong, steady footsteps echoed on the thick carpet like a marching drum. A fresh team of attendants entered, followed by two captains with shining insignia on their shoulders. No one doubted it now. This was no coincidence. This was an order. And Adrian Cross was the man behind it. Victor staggered backward, muttering, "No, impossible, this is still my plane." But no one answered. Every eye in the cabin was fixed on one man, Adrian, the man who did not need to shout, did not need to boast, yet could make an entire system bow. The cabin door swung open once more. the hiss of hydraulics sounding like the final punctuation to an era. Every passenger held their breath. A line of figures entered, navy uniforms pressed sharp, polished shoes glinting under the amber cabin lights. At the front was Sophia Reyes, the new chief purser, tall and poised, her black hair pulled tight, her gaze sharp as a blade. Behind her, 3 young attendants marched in step, followed by 2 captains, whose epaulets gleamed with 4 bright stripes. They needed no introduction. Their presence alone shifted the air. First class, once Victor's stage, had become a courtroom, and he stood in the dock. Sophia halted in the aisle, her voice steady and resonant, each word carved into the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, by direct order of the Board of Directors, the previous crew will disembark immediately. From this moment, the new team assumes responsibility for this flight." A wave of whispers rippled through the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, bowed heads together. Several phones were raised, cameras recording a moment unprecedented in aviation history. Marissa Kane felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands shook, her throat tight. The old crew quietly removed their name tags, eyes downcast, and left without a word. Each step was a blade twisting in Marissa's chest. She had chosen wrong, betrayed fairness, and lost everything. Victor shot to his feet, face burning red, veins straining at his temples. "No, I do not accept this. This is my plane. I paid for every seat, every glass of wine here. You have no right to strip me down." Sophia turned, her eyes cold, her voice calm, yet leaving no room for appeal. "I am sorry, Mr. Langford. This is a directive from the highest level. There is no negotiation." Victor lurched forward, his growl feral. "The highest level? The highest level is me. I am the one who invested, the one—" He stopped mid-sentence as another figure stepped into the cabin. Nathan Cole, senior supervisor, still in his grey suit, his face expressionless. He advanced slowly, each footfall on the thick carpet, sounding like the pounding of stakes into the ground. "Mr. Langford," Nathan said, his tone even yet sharp, "you are no longer a shareholder with voting rights. All of your privileges at Skylux are suspended indefinitely. You will not represent this airline, neither on the ground nor in the air." The cabin erupted in astonished whispers. A passenger gasped, hand covering their mouth. Another chuckled with satisfaction. Cameras swiveled toward Adrian Cross, as if everyone now understood he was the center of the storm. Victor staggered, stumbling back into a seat. His voice broke, desperate. "No, you are betraying me. Adrian, you set me up." All eyes shifted to Adrian, still seated in 4C, his back straight, his hands clasped. When Victor screamed, he simply raised his head, gaze sweeping the cabin. No denial, no explanation, only silence. Silence that made the air tremble. Helena Ward in 2D let the corner of her lips curl. He did not need to speak. The world itself would testify for him. Victor lunged forward, his trembling finger stabbing at Adrian, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Don't think you've won. I'll call the press. I'll overturn." The rear cabin door opened. 2 security officers in dark uniforms stepped in. They said nothing, striding forward with decisive force. One spoke at last, his voice cold and unyielding. "Mr. Langford, please collect your belongings. We will escort you off this aircraft." The cabin froze. Victor stared, stunned, as if struck by lightning. He backed away, shaking his head, his voice shattering. No, this can't be. This is my seat. I've sat here for 10 years. No one answered. Passengers watched him with eyes that blended contempt and pity. Marissa bowed her head, tears slipping silently down her face. She had hurled her life into the abyss with a single wrong choice. Adrian remained silent. He did not need to rise, did not need to argue. His calm was the mirror that most clearly reflected Victor Langford's collapse. The officers took another step. The thud of their shoes on the carpet was the final verdict. And everyone knew the play of power had reached its last act. The pounding of security boots on the thick carpet echoed like the drums of judgment. First class fell into a suffocating silence. Every eye locked on Victor Langford, the man who once sat like a monument, now trembling like a leaf in a storm. "No, you cannot do this to me." His voice cracked, ragged as torn cloth. Victor flung out his arm, clutching desperately at seat 1A. "This seat is mine. For 10 years I have sat here. No one has the right to remove me." One of the two security officers, tall and broad, his eyes cold as steel, stepped forward. His voice was deep and steady, unyielding. "Mr. Langford, this is a direct order from the board of directors. Please cooperate." Victor shook his head violently, breath ragged, eyes wild as he searched for an ally. But instead of the familiar gaze of deference, all he saw was distance, indifference. Some passengers turned away, others raised their phones, recording his every move. Within hours, these images would make him the object of ridicule before the world. In seat 2D, Helena Ward slowly crossed her legs, raising her glass of wine. Her eyes gleamed with the cold detachment of someone watching a chess game whose outcome was already sealed. The throne he claimed had splintered. Now he was only a man adrift in the ruins of his own kingdom. Victor roared, his voice the cry of a wounded beast. "Adrian, you set me up! This is all you're doing!" Every eye shifted toward Adrian Cross. He remained in 4C, calm, his hands clasped, his posture that of a silent judge awaiting the moment to deliver a verdict. He neither denied nor confirmed. The depth of his gaze alone declared one truth. Power had changed hands. Marissa Kane pressed herself against the cabin wall, her heart pounding. A tear slid down her cheek. If she had stood with Cross then, would things have been different? But regret now could not save a career already shattered. The officers stepped forward. Victor recoiled, his back pressed into seat 1A, clinging to the last shreds of illusion. "You will regret this. I will sue. I will destroy Sky Lux." A heavy hand landed on his shoulder. Not violent, not harsh, but weighted like stone. Victor broke into sobs, the sound fractured and hollow. "Please, sir," the officer emphasized. In that moment, Victor released his grip on seat 1A. His trembling fingers left faint grooves on the soft leather. He was led down the aisle, past dozens of watching eyes. No respect remained, only the gaze of witnesses observing the fall of an empire. When Victor disappeared through the door, the cabin exhaled as though freed from a curse, but the silence that followed was not relief. It was anticipation. Sophia Reyes, the new chief purser, stepped into the center of the cabin. Her voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Skylux, we sincerely apologize for what has transpired. By direct order of the Board of Directors, Seat 1A is hereby restored to its rightful passenger, Mr. Adrian Cross." Every gaze turned to Adrian. He sat still, his posture straight, his face calm as though he had foreseen this all along. Ethan Hale in 3A whispered, eyes wide with realization. So he is the one who truly holds power. Some passengers began to nod, others exchanged hushed words, their expressions shifting to respect. Adrian rose slowly. No rush, no display. Each step toward Seat 1A hammered shut the coffin lid on Victor Langford's reign. When he stopped before the seat, the entire cabin fell silent, as though witnessing a coronation. Sophia inclined her head lightly. "Mr. Cross, please return to your rightful place." Adrian placed his hand on the armrest of Seat 1A, the supple leather a symbol restored. He turned, his eyes sweeping across the cabin, meeting the gaze of those who now looked on with reverence and awe. Then he sat down. No declaration, no smug smile, only silence. But that silence thundered, etched forever in the memory of every passenger. True power requires no noise. Helena Ward sipped her wine, a faint smile playing at her lips. He is the same as ever, Adrian. Silent until the world has no choice but to listen. First class had changed. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the fear. In its place, a new atmosphere, heavy yet infused with respect. And in that moment, everyone understood. Skylux 718 would not just be a flight. It would become a story. The first-class cabin of Skylux 718 fell into silence after Adrian Cross settled into Seat 1A. But it was no longer the suffocating silence of fear. It was a different kind of silence, the silence of respect, of bearing witness to a historic moment. The warm golden light washed over Adrian's face as he opened his tablet and lightly scrolled through cold numbers. A simple action, yet to the passengers it carried the weight of a declaration. Order had been restored. A middle-aged man in row 3C leaned over and whispered. He didn't need to say a word. Just by sitting there, the entire cabin had to acknowledge him. Beside him, a young woman raised her hand to her mouth, eyes glimmering. That is real power. At the back, Marissa Kane, the former chief purser, stood pressed against the cabin wall. Her face was pale, her eyes red. If only I had not torn the ticket, if only I had chosen fairness over fear, I would not be standing here. The apology stuck in her throat, never to be spoken. Helena Ward remained still in Seat 2D, her sharp eyes locked on Adrian. She knew Adrian had not just reclaimed a seat. He had taught the cabin, and Skylux itself, a lesson. Helena sipped her wine, thinking, this is only the beginning. This silence will ripple outward like an undercurrent, forcing the entire system to change. The atmosphere began to shift. Those who had once bowed their heads in silence before Victor now began to raise them. A young businessman in 3A spoke up, his voice trembling but clear. We all saw it. Justice always has value. And today, justice won. A few scattered claps rang out. Not loud, but enough to spread like sparks through dry grass. Another joined in, then another. In moments, the entire cabin was applauding. The sound was not deafening, but it reverberated, shattering the false shadow of Victor's power. Adrian lifted his head, his gaze passing over the faces turned toward him. He did not smile, did not nod, only closed his eyes gently, as if to acknowledge and preserve the moment for himself. In the corner of the cabin, Senior Supervisor Nathan Cole stood with his arms folded, his eyes fixed on Adrian. He knew the board had not merely ordered a replacement crew. They had chosen to stand behind Adrian, and Nathan understood he was witnessing a transfer of power more significant than any resolution in a boardroom. The female pilot's voice came through the speakers, steady and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the new crew has fully taken command. The flight will continue on schedule." A familiar announcement, but this time it carried certainty, trust. The first-class cabin seemed cleansed of the suffocating darkness that had lingered before. Marissa bowed her head, her trembling hands clutching her notebook. That applause was not for her. It was a sentence. Helena leaned forward, her voice low. Just enough for Adrian to hear. "You are still the same, still the... silent until no one dares to dismiss you." Adrian opened his eyes, his gaze calm yet deep as the sea. He replied, his voice low and precise. "And you are still the same, appearing at the exact moment that makes the entire system shudder." A brief silence followed. Then Helena's lips curved into a faint smile. Between them, no more needed to be said. Once allies, then divided, now reunited in a moment of justice. The soft tapping of Adrian's tablet keys filled the air. Each number, each chart that appeared was more than data. It was proof that he controlled more than a seat. He controlled the heartbeat of an entire system. A passenger whispered to his companion, "Victor, and all of us were wrong." He was never the weak one. He was the one holding the scales. The atmosphere of the first-class cabin, once thick with the arrogance of one man, had been transformed to its core. No longer ruled by the fear of a roar, but by respect for a silence that forced the system to change. Adrian leaned back into seat 1A, his hands loosely clasped, his eyes gazing out the window. The vast night sky stretched endlessly, clouds drifting quietly. In them, he saw not just the sky of a single flight, but a mirror of truth. When justice is trampled, all it takes is one person to stand up, or to sit firmly in the seat they rightfully own, and the system will bow its head. The lights in the first-class cabin dimmed, casting a warm golden hue across the cream leather seats. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, dark clouds drifting quietly past the windows. But inside, the silence was thick as though everyone had just witnessed a trial without a verdict, yet each one already knew the outcome. Adrian Cross sat firmly in the seat 1A, his composure like that of a statue. He opened his tablet, eyes moving across rows of charts. But to the passengers around him, this was no longer just a man reviewing data. It was the image of a commander-in-chief a man who had shifted an entire system with a single word. Whispers spread throughout the cabin. He must be the one behind it all. Just one word, now, and the entire crew vanished. This isn't a passenger. This is the one in control. Victor Langford had been escorted away, yet his presence lingered. His seat lay empty, the shattered champagne glass still at his feet, shards of crystal glinting like the remnants of a fallen dynasty. No one touched it. No one dared clear it. It had become the symbol of arrogance buried. At the back, Marissa Kane stood pale and trembling. Every whisper, every glance toward Adrian pierced her like knives. If only I had defended the truth, maybe I would not be the one forgotten. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she bit her lip, refusing to let a sound escape. In seat 2D, Helena Ward sat upright, her eyes fixed on Adrian. She waited, because she knew this man never stopped at a single seat. At last, Adrian closed his tablet and raised his head. His gaze swept across the cabin, not cold, but deep enough to make anyone who met it lower their eyes. Then he turned to Helena. "What do you see?" His voice was low, steady, carrying easily through the cabin. Helena tilted her head, her eyes flashing. "I see. This is only the beginning." A brief pause, then her voice sharpened like a blade. "Victor Langford is not unique. This system is filled with men who believe money gives them the right to trample everything. Seat 1A is only a symbol. If you truly want change, we must strike at the root." Adrian listened, his hands clasped loosely before him. His eyes glimmered not with the light of a man satisfied with a small victory, but of one who already saw the larger battlefield ahead. "You are right," he said softly. "Respect cannot be a privilege. It must be the minimum condition. And if the system does not understand that, we will make it learn." Helena allowed herself a faint smile, one both approving and challenging. "Are you sure you are ready? This game will be 100 times more ruthless than Victor." Adrian turned to the window. The city lights below shimmered, reflected in his eyes like 1,000 embers. He drew in a slow breath, his voice firm. "I have been ready for a long time. The harsher the storm, the more we need someone calm enough to hold the balance." Helena studied him, then let out a quiet laugh, not mocking, but in agreement. "You are still the same. Silent to the very end, until the world itself has no choice but to listen." A nearby passenger, the young businessman Ethan Hale, overheard, his eyes wide. A feeling rose within him. He had just witnessed not merely a scene on an airplane, but the opening act of a revolution. The intercom crackled, and the female pilot's calm voice filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are leaving national airspace. Our flight will continue on schedule to New York. Please relax and enjoy your journey." A familiar announcement, but this time it carried a new certainty, a quiet authority. The cabin no longer felt the same. The atmosphere had shifted. Every gaze toward Adrian now carried not suspicion or indifference, but respect, tinged with unease, as if they sat alongside a force no one could oppose. Helena set her glass down and leaned back. She knew with clarity. From the moment Adrian sent the word "now," the world had entered a new chapter. and the first-class cabin of Skylux 718, once a sanctuary of luxury and quiet, had become the starting point of a storm that would shake the skies of commerce. The moonlight spilled silver across the sky outside the window, tearing through dark clouds that thinned into fragile ribbons beneath the wing. Skylux 718 cut forward, carrying with it a first-class cabin that had just endured an invisible storm. Yet instead of chaos, what lingered now was silence, the silence of a new order. Adrian Cross sat firm in seat 1A, his hands clasped before him. Not a word, not an unnecessary movement. But it was that very silence that made the entire cabin feel as though they were in the presence of an unshakable principle. The man whose boarding pass had once been torn, who had been cast into seat, now sat immovable in the place that was rightfully his. A middle-aged passenger in 3C leaned toward his wife and whispered, "I have never seen anyone stay silent and still bring an entire system to its knees." His wife nodded, her eyes never leaving Adrian. "He doesn't need to prove anything. He is the proof." At the back, Marissa Kane stood, her heart racing. Humiliation gnawed at her. If only I had stood by the truth. If only I had not let fear dictate me. But it was too late. Silent tears traced down her cheeks, falling into the emptiness where she once thought she held control. In seat 2D, Helena Ward leaned back slightly, her gaze fixed on Adrian. She remembered the years when the two of them dreamed of a fairer world before splitting over differences in philosophy. And now, in this muted golden light, she realized the dream had never died. It had only been sleeping, waiting for this moment to ignite. Helena tilted her head and spoke low, just enough for Adrian to hear. "You know this. Today was only the warm-up. Victor is just one among dozens, hundreds, who think they own the world. If we want real change, we will have to face the entire system." Adrian turned, his eyes as deep as the ocean floor, his voice steady and resolute. "I know, and I did not return to seat 1A just to defeat one man. I returned to remind the system itself that respect is not a privilege. It is a fundamental right for everyone." Helena stayed quiet for a beat, then smiled faintly. It was not the smile of someone drunk on victory, but of someone recognizing that an old ally still stood at her side. "You are still the same, Adrian. The man who stays silent until the world has no choice but to listen." A wave of murmurs swept the cabin. Passengers began speaking to one another, no longer timid. A young businessman whispered, "Perhaps today we did not just witness a fight over a seat. This is the beginning of a new order." An elderly woman nodded. "Yes, I will remember this day. Not because Victor was dragged out, but because one man showed us that silence can shake the world." The intercom came alive once again, the calm voice of the female pilot filling the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are flying at 30,000 feet. Weather is clear. We wish you a safe journey." Ordinary words, but in the first-class cabin they sounded like the drums heralding a new chapter. Adrian leaned back, his gaze fixed on the window. City lights twinkled in the distance, like fallen stars scattered across the earth. In his mind, one thought echoed. This is not the end. This is the beginning. He lifted his glass of water and took a sip. A simple act, yet to the passengers it was like a ceremony. Every eye turned toward him. No one looked at Victor's empty seat anymore. No one remembered the chaos of his screams. What remained was the image of a calm man, with new authority now seated in place. Helena straightened, her voice clear, like a promise whispered to fate. The game has just begun, Adrian, and I will not stand aside. Adrian gave a slow nod, his eyes flashing like lightning in the night. The fiercer it is, the more the world needs someone to hold balance. I am ready. The cabin fell into silence once more, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of anticipation. Anticipation of what might happen when one man decides to turn silence into the sharpest weapon of all. Outside, the sky stretched on forever, and Skylux 718, once just another flight, had become the launch point of a storm that would not stop until the entire world was changed. On that flight, a torn ticket may have seemed like a small matter. But when Adrian Cross reclaimed the seat that was rightfully his, an entire system was forced to change. The truth became clear. Real power does not need to shout. It reveals itself in steadfast silence, in an unshakable belief in justice. If you believe that respect is not a privilege, but a fundamental right of every human being, like to let this story spread further. Subscribe to the channel to continue following the journeys where justice finds its voice. And before you leave a comment with 2 words, quiet power, to affirm that you too believe in the strength of silence that can shake the entire world.